and the needs that require more funds in the inner city schools. So how do we change it? Well, one of the ways that they're talking about is a student-weighted funding formula, where the funds will go to the school where that student is based on the student needs. We also have to make sure that the teachers are balanced in inexperienced, inexperienced, and that the resources are there to develop the inexperienced teachers to provide the best quality of education. Those teachers who are in jobs out in the suburban communities where the least amount of challenges are, but they get the most amount of money, need to be transferred into the inner city where the greatest resources are. If they're serious about educating children, then the ones who have the most experience need to go where the students have the most need.
We don't have a compensation strategy so that the school with the teachers with less experience have some kind of differential where that money, that gap in funding, would come by ways of tutoring programs, intervention services, or some particular professional development for that school. That is one of the issues that the board is wrestling with this year as we look towards reinventing how we resource our schools, how we meet the needs of kids. We have to take the hard look at where are the dollars today. Yes, indeed, our norm strategy, along with our categorical programs, where if you are a child of poverty, there is an additional dollar for you, Title I dollars from the federal government, or if you're an economic impact aid recipient of the state money, which is usually English learner money, how do we use those budgets? And how are we making sure that that is supplemental and not supplanting? The categorical money is supposed to be used to augment the experiences for these particular populations. And that is also one of the places where we have to be accountable and transparent about adding to the core curriculum and not using that money to fund the core curriculum.
If you're simply counting dollars in schools, and if you allocate teachers uniformly, so that is every, say, 30 students or every 25 students generates one teaching position. And because older, more experienced teachers with more education are paid more, typically the beginning of a salary schedule to the very top of a salary schedule, there's a difference of about 2 to 1. So you would see for the same number of teachers, you could be spending twice as much money in teacher resources in one school than in another school. Teacher compensation, which would be their salary plus their benefits, and many benefits are tied to salary because they're based on a percentage of salary. Those salaries probably represent 80 or 90% or more of the amount of money being spent in a school. So if the same 20 teachers, their total compensation is 1.5 or 2 times as much, there'll be more dollars in the schools that have the more experienced, more senior teachers. To the extent that that correlates with good teaching, you have a disadvantage in the schools that have the less experienced teachers. In most places, dollars don't directly follow children. Typically, we provide a number of teaching positions on ratios. Every so many children generates a teacher, and then you work out formulas when it doesn't divide out evenly or things like that. If you do that, you have more senior teachers, you'd expect to see more dollars spent per student in those schools. Now, almost all systems, and certainly California's and LA's, generate a lot of additional resources through what are typically known as categorical grants. And those are grants aimed at providing additional help for children with additional needs, be they from low-income families, they're not English speakers as a first language, they have some disability. That additional money, in theory, is given to a school or to a district to distribute to schools and is supposed to supplement and not supplant the other resources. If a school district is allocating its resources equally so that 2 schools with the same number of children have the same number of teachers, but one school has a large number of low-income children, then there should be additional resources to hire additional teachers, perhaps additional aides, buy additional services for the children in that school, and it should all work. Where it potentially falls down is if you don't have enough money across the whole system to pay all the teachers as you divide them up, and you actually start using some of the resources in these categorical programs to pay teachers to do regular jobs.
My name is Marshall Tuck. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of a group called the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools. It's Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa's education effort. We currently run 10 of the lowest performing schools in Los Angeles. First and foremost, school is about education and it's about academic achievement. So it's looking at the students at the schools, where are they performing? And those who are familiar with Los Angeles know we've got a school, Roosevelt High School, 3% of the students are proficient in mathematics. You know, we got 2 middle schools down in Watts where 10% of the students are proficient in math and English. So when we talk about lowest performing, We're talking about the vast, vast majority of the students at these schools not being at grade level. And when you're not at grade level, you're not on a path for success long term. So talking about the current funding, both statewide and in the school district, it's certainly one of the bigger problems for our schools. And there's a couple reasons. One is it's not flexible, and the second, frankly, is it's not distributed equitably. If you're a citizen in LA, if you're a parent in LA, you really don't have a good, strong understanding of what are the dollars, how do they work in Los Angeles? And frankly, I've been working in public schools for almost 10 years here in LA, and it's still a little bit of a mystery to me, and I'm pretty deep into this. It's not transparent, it's not open, it's a bit of a black box. Public education funding is majority from the state in California. There's about 10% that's in the federal government, but the majority is from the state. And the vast majority of the money is focused on a per pupil basis, which means it follows the student. California, at the high school level, let's say it's around $10,000 a kid. That money then goes to the school district. What should happen, in our belief, is that that money would then follow the student. So it goes down to the student at that same funding level. What happens in reality is this money goes to a central district, and then they actually decide how that money gets distributed. And it doesn't get distributed to follow the students, and it certainly doesn't get distributed equitably. In some cases, in particular, when we think about teacher funding, teachers aren't funded based on what they actually cost. They're averaged out across all the teaching base. So for example, if you're at a school, you look at your budget, you could be a second-year teacher or a 15-year teacher, and it both costs the same amount of money. What it means is that schools with younger teaching populations, which typically are high poverty, high need schools, are really getting less money. And schools with older teaching populations are essentially getting more money. Because it's behind this black box, because it's not overly transparent about where the money's going,